Learning to play Age of Sigmar is a difficult task for a new wargamer. Once you get your models built and painted, you just want to put them on the tabletop, get into combat, and fight it out with your opponent. But one of the most important and fun parts of the game is coming up with a game plan and scoring battle tactics so that you can earn some victory points. So in this video, we're going to be looking at all of the core book battle tactics for 4th edition Age of Sigmar and how you can score them in a game of Warhammer. This video is aimed at beginners that are just trying to wrap their head around the rules and the gameplay, but if you are an experienced player watching and you have some advice to share, please feel free to do so in the comments. So what are battle tactics? In Age of Sigmar, you win matches by scoring more points than your opponent. And you can do this by controlling objectives and by scoring battle tactics. So preventing your opponent from doing either of these things is also valuable, and when you learn how to get your own army to score points, you can start thinking about the reverse of that and how you can apply it to stop your opponent from doing the same thing. At the start of every turn, you're going to pick a battle tactic to achieve, and you'll have until the end of your turn to achieve that text that's listed on the battle tactic. If you do so, you're going to earn 4 victory points. Regardless if you score the battle tactic or not, once you select one to try and score it, you can no longer select it for the rest of the match. At the time of filming this video, there are 6 universal battle tactics for all armies in the core book and 2 tactics per alliance in the General's Handbook for this season of play. And we're going to be looking specifically at the core battle tactics in this video, so let's get started. First up is Seize the Center, and this is a battle tactic that says you complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if 2 or more friendly units are within 3 inches of the center of the battlefield and are not in combat. So this is a battle tactic that is easy to complete if you go first, and this is because generally during the deployment phase, you'll have to put your models at least 9 inches away from the center. It means that your opponent cannot set up in that area to impede you from scoring this battle tactic. However, you'll have to be careful, as sitting in the middle puts you closer to your opponent no matter where they are deployed. You'll also want to make sure that your opponent doesn't have the ability to countercharge into the middle and disrupt you scoring this tactic. If their units can get into the middle with you, you don't actually score the battle tactic. It can be pretty hard to countercharge into the middle on the very first turn, but it's not impossible. Later in the game, if you try to score this, you'll have to consider where your opponent is positioned so that they don't ruin the chance for you to get this tactic. If you go second and your opponent does not go into the middle, then it's also likely very set up for you to just go into the middle, score the battle tactic. But again, just keep an eye on if anybody can countercharge you, get into the middle, and stop you from scoring the tactic. The next one is Take the Flanks, which reads, you complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if you have at least 1 friendly unit within 6 inches of each short battlefield edge. None of these units are wholly within friendly territory, and none of these units were set up this turn. So this is one of these safer battle tactics to take on turn 1. Essentially, you deploy a unit on each of your sidelines of the battlefield that has the ability to move over 9 inches reliably. As I said before, on most battle plans, your army will deploy at least 9 inches from the center line, so you want to take something that has over 9 inches of movement, like a cavalry unit or something with an extra move. You can always use the run command, but if you are depending on that and you don't get a big enough run, then you may not get this battle tactic. With Take the Flanks, you can't wholly be in friendly territory, which means that even if a little part of your model is over the half line and in the enemy territory, then you can actually get this, and you don't have to fully commit to crossing the halfway line. You just need 1 model just crossing that line. It doesn't matter if enemy units are present for this tactic, so you can score it even if you go second, and you can even use your opponent's models as a way to charge into that space if you don't have enough movement and to help you get across the board. Keep in mind that you can't score this battle tactic with newly set up units. That means that units that were deployed during a turn or that were teleported or set up by some sort of an ability in a new spot won't be able to score this battle tactic. Take Their Land is the next tactic, and it reads, pick a terrain feature wholly or partially within enemy territory and wholly outside of friendly territory. You complete this battle tactic if you control that terrain feature at the end of your turn. This is often an easy tactic to score, as half the battlefield will be your opponent's territory on many of the maps. This one is very easy to score with a unit that has high mobility, or a unit that can fly, or could be deep striked or teleported around on the map. The way contesting a terrain feature works is very similar to contesting an objective. you have to be in combat range with it, and with every single model that you want to count towards the control score that contests it. And generally, you're going to find terrain features that no enemy models are even near, which makes it very easy to score this, even with a single unit. If your opponent happens to have a lot of models contesting one of their terrain pieces, don't pick this tactic unless you can get a higher control value than they have by the end of the turn. And if you are on a map with very small territories, this can become more of a difficult tactic to achieve because there will be less terrain options that are actually within enemy territory. Next, we have Slay the Entourage, which says, pick a unit in the enemy's general's regiment. You complete this battle tactic if that unit is destroyed this turn. So opposing players are going to try to stop you from doing this by typically having fewer or tougher units in their general's regiment in an attempt to deny you this tactic. And sometimes your opponent's general might be the best choice just because it's the weakest unit in there. Unless your opponent has a large general's regiment or has handed you their units on a silver platter, this will be a more difficult battle tactic to score in the first few turns. At the beginning of the battle, make sure that you understand which units are in your opponent's general's regiment, and then make note of that if need be. Each turn you should be evaluating where they are and how feasible it is to kill them that turn. Consider what your opponent might do to stop you, especially because you'll have to declare your intention at the start of the turn by selecting that battle tactic. Can they redeploy? Are you depending on a charge coming off that may not come off? Do you have enough damage to kill something? Or does something like all-out defense change your ability to kill something? Attack on two fronts is a battle tactic that reads, you complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if you control 2 or more objectives that you did not control at the start of your turn, and at least one of those objectives was controlled by your opponent at the start of your turn. So this can be a tricky tactic to achieve, but you need to look for the right opportunity. When your opponent leaves an objective vacant, that means it's a great chance to do this. It can also be a good tactic late in the late game where the board has cleared up a little bit, there's less units on there, and you have the ability to move on to open objectives. If you have the ability to teleport units or deep strike, then this can also be very helpful for this battle tactic. Otherwise, you have to consider how you're going to force an opponent off an objective by fighting them and killing them. Hitting them with a big hammer unit on a charge will be a big part of this. But it will also be a difficult battle tactic to achieve against castle armies that are going to be grouped up and all buffed on their objectives. If your opponent teleports and deep strikes on you, then taking back your own objectives that they've taken from you can also be part of how you get this battle tactic. As always, watch out for counter charge and power through that your opponent might use to reinforce one of their objectives and stop you from scoring it. Finally, we have Do Not Waver. You complete this battle tactic at the end of your turn if 2 or more friendly units fought this turn and no friendly units were destroyed this turn. So Do Not Waver can often be a battle tactic in the first few turns that is appealing because you may be able to dictate who is fighting and your units will generally be healthier. However, it's a tactic that can be scored at any point of the game as long as you have survivable units that are in combat. So make sure that you do not use this tactic if any of your units are in poor shape or are easy to kill and are currently in combat. You'll also want to make sure that you can't be countercharged and lose a unit during that turn. If you have any units that are on the borderline for surviving, you'll want to attack the units that would attack your weak unit first to try to kill them so they don't actually kill your weak units. You can also ask your opponent if they have any access to first strike effects, as that will make it very difficult for you to score this in certain circumstances. If you want to deny your opponent this tactic, you can think about using commands like redeploy, countercharge, power through. If you countercharge, then you could still power through on their turn. And note, if a unit charges, they can still use a fight ability, even if there's no enemies left once it's their turn to attack. It means that you can still complete this battle tactic if you were fighting a single enemy unit, your first unit killed them, but your second unit charged in, they can still make a pile and move, and you would count as completing this tactic. That's going to be it for this video, and I do hope that it helps you score some battle tactics and get more out of your game. It's really important that you plan out what scoring a battle tactic looks like for your army, especially maybe on the first 2 turns. At least you have an idea of, do I want to go for take the flanks? Do I want seize the center? And then you can plan out what your potential deployments would look like, or ask yourself, which units are you actually going to score these battle tactics with? And that's going to come back to list writing. It's going to come back to how you deploy, and it's going to come back to how you actually plan out your turns, your buffs, and all of those good things that you have to think of when you're playing Age of Sigmar. So let me know what you think about this in the comments below if you have any advice for new players, but otherwise, good luck on the battlefield.